Evening, everybody. It's Wednesday. Is it? Yeah, Wednesday. Wednesday the something. 11th of May, I think. I've no idea. Days are totally blending into another. So let's crack on with a couple of quickies, as it were. So, first one is this one. This one in a tin. And this was part of the selection that I started off with when I started the challenge, which was a inheritance from the mother of one of my daughter's school friends, who said, I've got a load of whiskey, my aunt's just died, and they had a load of whiskies. They went around, they did a lot of travelling, and they collected mainly miniatures on duty free and bits and pieces like that. Some full-size bottles as well, and I'm still trying to get them sold on their behalf. And there's some really good stuff in there as well, so I'll try and later on kind of maybe put some links through, or I'm just basically trying to sell them on their behalf too, because it's cluttering up their space. Now I've got it in my house now, but there's quite a lot of stuff in there, so essentially as way of a kind of commission, because I've been thinking about doing the challenge, it was a case of, well look, can I nab a load of the miniatures that are kind of the basic bottlings that probably wouldn't get a lot anyway, to start me off. So it gave me about 40 to 50 to start the challenge off with, which was pretty impressive, of which this was one of them. Now Ben Nevis is here, and it is the tallest mountain in Scotland, and the distillery is at the base of the mountain. Now it's the water source that feeds into the distillery itself is actually from two pools. It originates from two pools halfway up the mountain, so it's pretty pure water that's coming in. So it was founded in 1825 by a fantastically named guy called Long John MacDonald, who was actually the cause, the legend behind Long John blended whiskey, which I've never come across, don't have a sample of, and haven't actually seen for donkey's years, so I don't know if it's still around. Now he died in 1856, and it was inherited by his son, the equally fantastic named Donald MacDonald. Didn't really think that one through, they didn't spend a lot of time on that. Now there was another distillery, because it was quite popular. There was another distillery nearby that opened pretty much over the road called the Nevis distillery, which opened in 1878, and in the next kind of 10-20 years the two actually combined. It was really a separate distillery opened to try and meet demand, and eventually it was like, well, we'll just combine the two and join them together. In 1989 it was acquired by Nikka, the Japanese whiskey company, and it is still owned by them now. Now this particular 10-year-old is their standard bottling, and it was first launched in 1996, and it looks quite old. You know, you sort of look at that label and it looks a bit dated, as does the packaging, right? It still looks like this. There's a very good chance that this bottling, this miniature, is probably from late 90s, quite possibly. And yet, if you look on the Ben Nevis Distillery website and you look at the standard 10-year-old, it's still got that packaging. It has not changed whatsoever over the years. So it probably, to be honest, I think it needs a little bit of a rehab, shall we say. It needs a bit of updating, and it needs a bit of modernisation, particularly with some of these new fancy labellings that are coming out. I get what they're possibly trying to do in terms of making it look traditional, but it does look dated, to be perfectly honest. So, does it say anything on the back of the list in terms of, a period of 10 years of maturing in oak casks? Oak casks, wow. That doesn't really narrow it down at all. It's 46% though, unusual for what I'd call a standard bottling. But yeah, all the stuff on the back of the label is just about the mountain itself rather than the whiskey. So I'm not 100% certain as to what it's actually matured in, apart from oak casks. But are they sherry, bourbon, anything like that? Not really sure. So let's crack on, because that's about all I can tell you about the distillery. I couldn't be bothered to read up about the mountain. It's a mountain, it's high, it's got snow on the top of it, there's people that ski on it and stuff. There's a visitor centre at the distillery that opened in 1991 that was basically taking advantage of all the tourists that go to Ben Nevis. I'm surprised it took them that long to open a visitor centre, because it's a very, very big tourist trap in Scotland, and any type of visitor centre, whiskey and Ben Nevis will do an absolute bomb, I'm sure. So, it's my dog wandering around outside being a pest. I chucked him out the kitchen. I couldn't be bothered with his snuffling. See, now on the nose there's a little bit of an edge to it, and it's almost like it's a blended whiskey with some grain whiskey in there. Because there's just a very, very slight, I can't remember which one it was when I talked about the slightly artificial nose that I pick up, that I associate with cheaper whiskies, and more often than not cheaper blended whiskies. And there's a little bit of that there, not massively so, but there's just the merest touch of this slightly artificial edge to it. Now it's 46%, so it's entirely possible that that slightly higher alcohol percentage is also exacerbating that, just by kind of giving it a little bit more heat than I was expecting. But yeah, just a little bit. There's a sweetness to it, but it's a slight artificial sweetness. And there is some woodiness on there as well. And it's woodiness rather than oakiness. It's kind of a generic wood. It's not a great deal on there. It's a bit better on the palate. The sweetness isn't as artificial. That harshness isn't necessarily there. It's not hugely well balanced. It's got quite a nice sherry sweetness to it. Yeah, there's a bit of... It's pleasant, but... It's a little unbalanced. It's a little bit rough around the edges. It's okay. You're looking at about 30 to 35 quid for this. So it's on the cheaper end of sort of a 10-year-old single malt whiskey. But it's just a little bit unbalanced. There's some nice elements in there. There's not a bad sweetness to it. The oakiness isn't actually that unpleasant. It's not particularly drying. There's a nice warmth, which is the slightly increased alcohol percentage. There's not really any depth to it. There's not a massive amount of finish. It's a little bit jumbled. It's a little bit shaky. I could add a couple of drops of water to it, but I don't really think it's going to do it any favours. Plus, I've only got a tiny little bit left. It's barely worth it. It's okay. It's a functional single malt Scotch whisky. It's nothing particularly fantastic, nothing particularly bad about it. It's just a bit average. But it's kind of what I expected, to be perfectly honest. You look at that packaging and you think, there's nothing really special about that. It's a bit roughshod, and it needs a bit of work. If they were going to relaunch it and they were going to say, right, we'll do some new packaging and we'll do a bit more work on the whiskey and we'll bring that sweetness to the fore, we'll maybe knock the percentage down to maybe 43%, and we'll do a bit more work, we'll use some better casks or something. I don't think it'll take a lot, but it just needs a little something to kind of lift everything, smooth out all the edges, jazz it up a little bit, make it a bit more interesting, and they'd probably be onto something. But it's just a bit... yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's not wowing me, as you could probably tell. Right, that's that one down. I shall do a quick rinse out, and then we're on to something potentially quite special for the next one. So I shall see you then. Cheers.